On a beautiful day in the 37th year of the Meiji era, this is Sugimoto. He was participating in the war between Russia and Japan with his friend. When the commander gave the order, Moto and his comrades advanced toward the enemy base. The Russian soldiers responded with gunshots and bombs. Many of Moto's comrades fell amidst the rain of bullets. Moto was also hit, but defied death and charged straight into the Russian formation. Moto began fighting ferociously, killing while shouting, "I am the immortal Moto." Alone, he turned bodies into mountains. One would think that with such feats he would receive a medal after the war. But when the war was over, Moto had to look for gold, collecting coins in Hokkaido only because he couldn't stand to see the commander and killed him. Or maybe it was because he wore a rag tied around his neck. Knowing that Moto needed money, a nearby drunken uncle told him a story. Of course, it was related to gold. Long ago, on the banks of a river in Hokkaido, there were gold nuggets the size of beans. People there could collect up to 30 mom a day. During that time, some Ainu stored tons of gold to prepare to fight against Japanese forces because even after the Meiji Restoration, these troops still oppressed the people. Then a bandit appeared. He killed all the Ainu and took the gold. Pursued by the police, he had to hide the gold. But he was captured before he could tell anyone the location. He was imprisoned in a Bashiri prison awaiting execution. He wanted to reveal the hiding place to his comrades outside, but he didn't write a letter knowing that the guards would steal it. There was a particularly cruel guard who cut a thief's Achilles tendon to prevent him from escaping. In this situation, the bandit had an idea: tattoos. He tattooed the code for the gold's location on the bodies of other death row prisoners. The code could only be deciphered by his comrade. However, some guards learned of the plan, so he sent some tattooed prisoners to look for the gold, but he didn't expect those prisoners to kill all the guards and escape. That's where the story ended because all the prisoners escaped and no one knew where the gold was. After telling the story, the uncle immediately fell asleep. Moto panned for a bit, then went to warm his hands. He remembered the Russo-Japanese War. At the time, Moto's friend had invited him to pan for gold when the war ended. The friend had a wife with poor eyesight who needed treatment and a child to care for, but it seemed he would never see them again. Later, Moto's friend was killed. He begged Moto to take care of his wife and child. Coming out of his memory, Moto found the uncle sober and pointing a gun at him, saying he had revealed too much. But this was no ordinary man, it was the immortal Moto. Moto calmly disarmed. The uncle fled in fear. At first, Moto hadn't believed the story, but now he understood. Moto began loading his rifle to go after the old man. To his surprise, when he found him, he was already a desiccated corpse. Examining him, Moto saw that the man had been attacked by a bear. Moto pulled off the man's shirt and sure enough, there was a tattoo with a code. He was euphoric as if he had found gold. Well, in fact, Moto would find gold. He rushed to hide the old man's body before the bear returned. Unfortunately, the bear found Moto. His gun jammed, so Moto ran to cliff. As the bear charged, an arrow brought it down. The archer was an Ainu girl. After the bear's death, the girl began to remove the flesh around the poisoned arrow. When Moto told her that the old man had been attacked, the girl was surprised. This type of bear had just come out of hibernation and could not yet eat. Only one type hunted in winter, the Madukaru, a brown bear. They did not hibernate and were extremely aggressive. The girl asked what Moto planned to do with the body. He said he would take it to a nearby village. The girl thought this was reckless as this type of bear would pursue anyone who stole its food. But now Moto couldn't give up the treasure right in front of him and also couldn't tell the girl about it. The girl suggested that Moto fight the Madukaru. As a soldier, Moto was not afraid to fight, but although he was skilled in combat, he still needed someone experienced in killing bears to support him. Seeing that this Ainu girl was quite honest and genuine, Moto decided to reveal the secret of the gold to her. The girl agreed to help Moto because among the Ainu who were killed was her father. At night, the two lit a campfire and used the corpse to attract the bear. Examining the corpse, the Ainu girl realized that the old man had no intention of sharing the gold with anyone. He had killed and skinned the other prisoners. Now Moto thought of skinning the old man, but it was too late. The bear would arrive before they could finish. They needed to light fires around the area to increase visibility during the night, and when morning came, they would have the advantage. While Moto was collecting firewood, he found the brown bear and immediately punched it. The girl, hearing Moto's voice, came to support him, but it was too dark for her to see anything to shoot. Moto clung to the underside of the bear so it couldn't attack him. The moment the girl had a clear line of sight, she shot the bear, but Moto, who was underneath, stabbed it with a knife, causing it to flee. When Moto broke away from the bear, it immediately turned its attention to attacking the girl. It was so fast that she couldn't pull her arrow in time. Fortunately, a white wolf jumped in and fought the bear in her place. The girl then pointed Moto to the direction of the bear's heart. He aimed and shot, but the bullet could not pierce its thick skin. The bear charged at Moto, who shouted, "I am immortal." Just before he let the bear impale itself on the knife mounted on the tip of his rifle, killing it, the girl recognized Moto's bravery and introduced herself as Asirpa. While he was dealing with the bear, Asirpa revealed that her father had been killed while transporting the gold bundles. She told him that their bodies were cut up and fed to animals. She still didn't know who had killed her father. Moto proposed that they look for the gold together. He only needed a small amount to help the wife of a deceased friend. Asirpa didn't think Moto would go so far as to hunt and skin the other escaped prisoner. In Ainu belief, a bear that kills and eats people becomes an evil god and is banished to hell. And she also didn't want to kill people. But Moto laughed and said that if killing people meant going to hell, then he must have a business class seat straight to below. Moto then pulled out his knife and began skinning the old prisoner's body. He told Asirpa that the man who had killed her father was still in prison. The government would not execute any of the prisoners until the location of the gold was found. Once the gold was found, prisoners would no longer be needed. Therefore, by helping him look for the gold, she would also be avenging her father. They would work together in a win-win partnership. He would do the killing and she would help him with her intelligence. Moto needed money, Asirpa needed revenge, different goals but the same path. If they cooperated, no one could stop them. The next morning, Moto and Asirpa set traps for squirrels. According to Asirpa, squirrel meat was delicious. Since the gold was still in Hokkaido, the escaped prisoners were probably still in the area too. So Moto would start hunting them. They wouldn't survive long in the mountains, so they would probably gather in the larger cities. He would start there. The main cities in Hokkaido included Sapporo, Hakodate, Asahikawa, and the city they were currently in, Otaru. Once in the city, Moto went to a thermal bathhouse. While bathing, he asked the people around him if they had seen anyone with strange tattoos. Although he called himself the Immortal Demon, Moto's body was covered in scars from all his battles. Meanwhile, Asirpa was asking questions in a brothel. The brothel owner realized she was Ainu and planned to sell her. She drew her knife and gave him a black eye. Just as he was about to retaliate, Moto appeared, punched him in the throat to silence him, and put him in a chokehold for interrogation. The brothel owner said he hadn't seen any clients with that type of tattoo, but that others had come asking about them. The two continued to question people in the area. When they realized someone was following them, they led him into the forest to expose him. The man let down his guard and fell into a trap Asirpa had set. Once captured, Moto interrogated him about the whereabouts of the other prisoners. The man didn't even know. He said that when they were moving together, the group suddenly turned on each other. He was lucky to escape and had no idea where the others were. Since there was no useful information, Moto got to work. He picked up his gun and knife. But Asirpa came back and said that if he killed the man, their cooperation would end. Moto then tied up the prisoner so Asirpa could draw the tattoo. While she was drawing, she asked the man what the leader was like. He barely had time to answer before a bullet went through his head. Moto grabbed Asirpa and pulled her to hide. The drawing was now stained with blood. Asirpa quickly spread the surrounding bushes to create smoke and obscure the shooter's aim, then fled with Moto. The shooter tracked their footsteps to follow them. He stepped on one of Asirpa's traps and lost his gun. Moto advanced to fight him, but this guy was no amateur. He easily took Moto's gun and revealed his identity. From the number on his shoulder, Moto realized that he belonged to Hokkaido 7th Division, the strongest unit in the army. Moto didn't want trouble with this man, so he introduced himself. Of course, the soldier wasn't going to let anyone connected to the gold escape. He charged at Moto with a knife, but Moto flipped him and pinned him down. Asirpa arrived in time to stop Moto from killing him. The soldier managed to escape and fled. Moto swung his rifle and hit him in the head, causing him to stumble into the river. Moto explained that if the guy survived, his division would go after them both. He didn't want to kill, but anyone who tried to kill him, he would kill them first. Kill or be killed. That's how he survived on the battlefield. Back at camp, Asirpa had hunted 3 squirrels and planned to make squirrel ground meat. After skinning them, she gave some fresh squirrel brains to Moto to try. He found it a bit disgusting, but still ate it. They ground the meat together. Afterwards, Asirpa rolled it into balls, added some seasonings, and cooked it. Moto found the dish surprisingly delicious. As for the soldier, he was lucky. His comrades found him and saved his life. The next day, Moto captured another escaped prisoner using the same old trick. He interrogated the man about how many had escaped. It seemed that people here hated the Ainu just like the Jews. The prisoner insulted Asirpa, which angered Moto, but Asirpa told him to let it go. She spotted a rabbit nearby, so the two went hunting. As soon as they were out of sight, the prisoner pulled out a razor blade he had hidden in his mouth. His name was Shira, known as a master escape artist. As soon as Asirpa caught the rabbit, Shira fled. Moto told her to go back to camp while he pursued him. Shira went down a cliff. Moto threatened to shoot him, but Shira wasn't afraid. At that moment, there was a loud cracking sound like a gunshot. Asirpa recognized it as the sound of trees breaking. It was the cold. An icy wind had dropped the temperature to below -30°C, causing the frozen water in the trees to expand and crack them. As they pursued Shira, both he and Moto fell into a freezing lake. The icy water made them cold to the bone. They had about 10 minutes to warm up before death. Shira, somewhat out of control, began to sharpen a large branch. Moto needed gunpowder from his bullets to start a fire, but they had all fallen into the river. Not wanting to freeze to death, he plunged back into the water to retrieve a bullet. But Shira was not foolish. He made a deal. Moto had to promise to let him live in exchange for help. When Moto agreed, Shira spat out a bullet he had hidden in his throat. The two men started the fire together. Through conversation, Moto learned that there were 24 escaped prisoners in total. As for Naparabo's friend, Shira didn't know. The only person who might know was the prison leader. Break. When they killed the guards, that man stole a sword and cut them down one by one. He was a samurai from the Bakumatsu era, Toshizo. Shira revealed that Naparabo had instructed him and the other prisoners to go to Otaru. Before they separated, Moto advised Shira to give up the goal, as even the strongest army division was hunting. Moto returned to camp at nightfall. Asirpa had cooked the rabbit for him. The taste was great, but something was missing, so he added some miso. Asirpa mistook it for poop and recoiled in disgust, seeing Moto enjoy it so much. Asirpa looked visibly disappointed. The next day, Asirpa took Moto to hunt a bear. she found a bear den and told Moto to crawl inside and lure it out. According to her father, a bear will not attack someone brave enough to enter its den. Moto didn't like the idea and suggested hunting something else. As they walked, Asirpa noticed something shining on the mountain. Moto recognized it as a scope. He quickly grabbed Asirpa and ran. A team of 4 men chased them using skis. Moto hid in the grass to conceal his tracks, knowing they couldn't outrun them. He gave the map to Asirpa and the two separated. Losing the trail, the team sent 1 man to look for Asirpa while the other 3 went after Moto. One of them seemed quite cunning. Following the tracks, he realized that Asirpa had deliberately gone in the opposite direction and then jumped into the bushes. But in fact, she had climbed a tree. He said he wouldn't hurt her and that he was just looking for Moto. She jumped for him to catch her. Suddenly, a squirrel in the tree dropped a map. When the shooter realized Asirpa was involved with Moto, he loaded his gun. But at that moment, the white wolf appeared. Moto, on the other hand, was captured shortly after. They knew him as the Immortal demon, so they were very cautious. With no other options, Moto desperately jumped into a nearby bear den. One man wanted to use smoke to suffocate Moto, but the other didn't want to waste time and shot directly into the den. The bear charged out and killed 1 man while the accidental shot killed the man next to him. Only 1 man remained. After a struggle, he killed the bear but died from blood loss. Moto emerged with a bear in his hand. He wasn't sure if he should take it back, fearing Asirpa would turn it into ground bear meat. Meanwhile, the white wolf had knocked out the remaining soldier. This wolf was larger than the normal type and continued to toss the soldier back and forth until he lost consciousness. Asirpa stopped him before he could kill him and rubbed his belly as a reward. Shortly after, Moto returned with a bear cub in his stomach, and the wolf disappeared. Asirpa ignored the soldier and returned to the village with Moto. She discovered the bear cub, but the Ainu people did not eat bear cubs. They would take them back to the village to raise. The Ainu people did not seem afraid of Moto and were actually curious about him. Asirpa lived with her grandmother, who was also the village chief. Moto talked to her even though he didn't understand the Ainu language. Some curious children approached him. Moto found the names strange as they all had connections to poop. Asirpa explained that the Ainu named their children with unpleasant names to ward off demons. Asirpa's old name was Anus, and Moto thought that demons would flee from that name. Asirpa's grandmother took care of the bear cub. Asirpa advised Moto not to get too close to the cub as the village had a custom of returning animals to the gods. Once the bear grew up, they would perform a ritual which did not necessarily involve killing. The village depended on hunting. So the animal gods were very important. They offered gratitude to the gods for protecting them from things beyond their control. The bear god was the most revered. Asirpa thought it best not to get too attached to the bear cub to avoid the sadness of separation later. Moto thought that Asirpa was different from the rest of the Ainu people. Her name even meant future change. Outside in the snow, Lieutenant Tokashiro of the 7th Division had arrived to look for the 4 missing men and Moto. Elsewhere, the elderly Toshizo had found another prisoner, Ashiyama, who was in a brothel. Toshizo planned to fight the 7th Division to retrieve the skins with the map tattoos and asked for Ashiyama's help. The next day, Asirpa took Moto fishing. There were many sea bass and she wanted to process them immediately, but Moto had forgot to bring a knife, so he hurried back to the village to get it. On the way back, he met Ozoma, Asirpa's uncle, who warned Moto about traps he had set. The villagers did not have a good opinion of the Japanese, but since Asirpa had brought Moto, they trusted him and were less suspicious of him. After talking for a while, Moto returned to help Asirpa. In the afternoon, they brought the fish back for Asirpa's grandmother to cook. Later, the sea bass soup was ready. Moto slurped it and even added miso to the dish. He invited Asirpa's grandmother to eat, but she reprimanded him with a stick. In the following days, Moto stayed in Asirpa's village. The children often played pranks to scare away demons. When Asirpa did this, the children were scared. But when Moto did it, they quickly ran to play elsewhere. That night, Moto heard a long howl. He remembered how the white wolf often saved Asirpa. Ozoma explained that the wolf's name was Ritar. When Asirpa and her father went hunting when she was a child, they saved the wolf and he always stayed with them, even after her father passed away. However, due to the wolf's proud nature, he could never be domesticated. One day he followed the call of his instincts, leaving Asirpa to grow up alone. Since then, Asirpa smiled less. But recently she seemed happier, perhaps due to Moto's presence. Asirpa's grandmother asked Moto to take care of her, and after some thought, Moto decided to leave. He wished her all the best and left during the night. The next day, Asirpa was furious that Moto had left and was determined to punish him. Meanwhile, Moto returned to the brothel to ask the owner if he had any information. The owner said that a client with a tattoo like Moto's had attacked one of his prostitutes. Moto then went to find the woman in a restaurant. While waiting, he ordered soba, and after finishing his meal, the restaurant owner led soldiers to the spot. Moto started fighting, but no matter how immortal he was, he had to surrender to the barrel of a gun. They wanted to kill him right there, but then Tokashiro arrived, insisting that it was he who would kill Moto. Back at the station, Moto was eating sweets and talking to avoid guilt. But Tokashiro mentioned the soldier Moto had saved near the river, repeatedly mentioning the words immortal. Of course, admitting to being the immortal demon would lead to death by bullet. So Moto continued to feign ignorance. Then Tokashiro made an accurate argument that Moto was holding the leather with the gold vault map. Moto continued to pretend he didn't understand, suggesting that perhaps the explosion had blown off a part of Tokashiro's brain, to outside, making him lose his mind. Annoyed, Tokashiro shoved a candy skewer down Moto's throat. Moto was no longer having fun. Tokashiro told him that if he worked for him, he would free him. Tokashiro needed more people spread across Hokkaido to look for the gold, which would be used to buy weapons from America, and then use that to overthrow the 7th Division. After that, he planned to take important ports for trade routes with the continent. Hokkaido would be his. Moto considered Tokashiro's plans a stinking endeavor and a waste of time. That night, Asirpa sent Rutar to follow Moto's scent into the city, but the wolf ended up finding Shira. It turned out that during the clothes change they had swapped socks. Hearing that Asirpa was looking for Moto, Shira told her that he was in the 7th Division and that once there the only way out was during the Bon Festival. Realizing that Moto was in danger, Asirpa insisted that Shira take her there. Of course, Shira didn't want to go into a death trap, so he quickly tried to escape, but Rutar caught him. Meanwhile, Moto was tortured for a whole day. The 2 soldiers he had previously defeated arrived to take revenge. When they pulled out their knives, he stood up, fought back, and kept shouting that he was immortal. Outside, Shira led Asirpa to the 7th Division headquarters. The 2 made a plan to rescue Moto inside. Moto was fighting but was still tied up, and the 2 soldiers wouldn't survive much longer if he wasn't restrained. Moto was taken to a separate room. Outside, Shira found Moto's location. He made a deal with Asirpa. He would help her if they split the gold. Asirpa didn't care about the gold, so she agreed. Shira began to tie a rope from the iron bars to a horse outside. Asirpa was to wait for the signal to incite the horse to break down the door. The plan was ready. Shira used grease to lubricate the interior to help save Moto. However, the horses outside got scared when they sensed Rutar. The 2 soldiers went back to kill Moto. One stood guard while the other worked. But that was the last time the guard saw his comrade. When the door closed, Moto broke free from his restraints and killed the soldier. When Tokashiro arrived, Moto was almost dead. Not wanting him to die easily, Tokashiro ordered his men to take him to the hospital. He needed to find the hiding place before Moto died. When Moto left, Tokashiro stayed to inspect the body. It was strange. The wounds didn't look like battle wounds. When he removed the shirt, he discovered that Moto had stolen the soldier's organs to simulate the injuries. Meanwhile, Moto resurrected, knocking down one soldier after another. Tokashiro took a horse and went after him. Asirpa shot Tokashiro's horse, but even without the horse, Tokashiro maintained his speed. He chose not to shoot Moto, and the arrow intended for the horse was avoided by Asirpa to prevent Tokashiro from tracking them. Upon returning to headquarters, it was on fire. Tokashiro was not worried because he had already covered himself with the leather. Moto returned to meet Asirpa. She used the family stick to punish him first. Later, Shira gathered everyone and informed them that he couldn't get the leather. Putting that aside, he was quite hungry and planned to cook the horse. Taking the horse with them would make them too conspicuous, so they decided to eat it. He would make sukiyaki, a popular dish at the time. Shira went to look for eggs so Asirpa and Moto could handle the meat. He felt a little embarrassed because if anything happened to her, he wouldn't know how to explain it to the villagers. Asirpa threw a piece of meat at Moto's face so he could use it to treat his wound. Choosing to go with him was her decision, and she didn't like being seen as a child who would hinder others. That night, after gathering all the ingredients, the sukiyaki was ready. When the meat was cooked, all they had to do was dip it in egg and eat. Asirpa discovered something strange in her portion. It looked like feces. Moto kept explaining repeatedly that it wasn't feces but miso that made the dish tastier. Asirpa tasted it reluctantly and was surprised at how delicious it was. Meanwhile, Tokashiro went to meet with a bandit to discuss a potential alliance. When negotiations failed, a conflict arose between the 2 sides and Tokashiro easily defeated the bandit. Despite his age, Tokashiro was still very brave. The next day, Shira went to the city alone to gather information. Moto and Asirpa decided to lay low for a while. The 2 went deer hunting, but after a while Moto started to feel tired and thirsty. Asirpa found a vine with a lot of water inside. She drank first but drank too much. Moto struggled but managed to drink some too. Asirpa then made a tool for Moto to walk in the snow. And they ventured deeper into the mountains where they found signs of a deer marking its territory. Asirpa used her family's inheritance to hit the tree and attract the deer. Indeed, it appeared, but in his haste Moto missed and hit the deer in the rear. They quickly pursued, but unexpectedly Asirpa noticed the footprints of a dog and 2 people. One of them was limping. It turned out that the soldier Asirpa had left behind was still alive and was with Hokkaido's best bear hunter, Nihei, who had just killed a bear with a single bullet. They learned that the soldier's name was Tanigaki. Nihei had already hunted 20 bears and his goal was to hunt the ancient wolf. Following the trail, Asirpa and Moto found a deer hidden under a tree. Asirpa would lure it out while Moto ambushed it, but since he wasn't good with a bow, he let the deer escape. That night Moto sat in a corner, disappointed with himself. The next day they continued tracking the deer. Asirpa noticed the uneven footprints and realized that the deer was weakening due to its injuries. As soon as they located the deer, this time Moto moved slowly into a position where he could easily aim. Asirpa lured the deer out, but as soon as it charged, Moto hesitated and missed. Memories of the battlefield flashed through his mind, causing him to falter. Fortunately, Rutar stepped in and captured the deer. Although injured, the deer still charged towards Moto with determined eyes, much like himself in battle, willing to charge to the end even if it meant death. Asirpa opened the deer's belly and placed Moto's hands inside to warm them. She explained that like any living thing, when it dies, its flesh would help them survive and nourish the earth. Its life was not wasted. As they began to prepare the deer, Rutar sensed someone approaching and asked Asirpa to leave. They quickly took what they needed and left. The moment Nihei and Gaki arrived, the skilled hunter easily identified the tracks left by Asirpa, Moto, and the wolf. The 2 began to plan to hunt the wolf. Moto and Asirpa returned to the shelter and discovered that Shira had returned. He even brought some alcohol for a celebration. As for the information Shira obtained from a fur trader, he revealed that a man imprisoned last year for 3 murders had recently appeared in Odaru. The man was a skilled hunter named Nihei. Meanwhile, Gaki had also seen Nihei's tattoo. But now he was torn between 2 choices: to kill him and return to the army, or to hunt the wolf with him. Gaki came from a well-known family of hunters and for some reason chose to stay with the army. However, the blood of a hunter still ran through him, and he was determined to bring back the wolf's skin. Asirpa knew about Nihei and that he had an Ainu dog with him. Shira heard from the merchants that they were willing to buy a white wolf skin for a high price. Asirpa immediately realized that Ritar was in danger. However, it was difficult to go there without proper visibility, so they decided to wait until morning. Meanwhile, Gaki and Nihei returned to the location where the deer's body was, hoping to see the wolf again. Unfortunately, in the morning, all they found were wolf feces, suggesting that the wolf had been watching them the whole time. Gaki had an idea and began to take off his clothes to attract the wolf's attention. Meanwhile, Nihei was hidden in the forest waiting to shoot. Soon Ritar appeared. If he showed his head, he would become just another extinct species. But when he revealed himself, an arrow was shot, causing Ritar to flee, and Nihei also missed his shot. Shira and Moto arrived at the old hunter's location, and Moto was ready to shoot him if he tried to move. The golden dog appeared, chewing on Moto's gun. But Moto quickly used a knife to cut off some of Nihei's fingers. The old man retaliated by swinging his gun at Moto's face. Moto bought time to allow Shira to retrieve the gun from the golden dog. However, as soon as they retrieved the gun, Gaki took Asirpa hostage. Moto, not wanting her to witness violence, told Shira to lower his gun. Nihei then tied the two up and told Gaki to take Asirpa away so he could deal with Moto. As they turned to leave, Moto and Shira managed to escape. Moto, a master escape artist, now needed to figure out how to rescue Asirpa. Gaki had let Asirpa out of the forest, but unfortunately for him, he stepped into a trap and was injured, leaving him with only one working leg. If he didn't receive medical attention soon, he would die due to the injury. Asirpa used a knife to cut out the infected flesh. Soon after, the old hunter appeared again. Knowing that Asirpa had a close connection to the wolf, he used her as bait to attract the creature. Wolves had long been considered extinct in these mountains, but what he wanted was not some coins. It was the skin of the last living wolf here. The old hunter tied Asirpa to a tree, and indeed the wolf appeared. He charged in a zigzag pattern, making him difficult to target. Instantly, the wolf bit the hunter's hand, but he managed to point the gun at the animal's throat. However, another wolf appeared from behind and bit the old hunter's neck. It turned out that the two wolves were a couple and had a litter of pups. Moto and Shira rushed to rescue Asirpa, and the golden dog along with Gaki managed to escort the old hunter a little further before he died. The old man with no regrets closed his eyes. Shira and Asirpa took Gaki back to the village while Moto stayed to skin the old hunter. Upon returning to the village, they handed Gaki over to the village elder for care. While preparing a feast of stewed venison, Asirpa didn't want to be abrupt, but she suggested that Moto eat the feces. Asirpa's mother brought fresh salmon for the three and explained that the fish had been a gift from the gods. However, recently the gods had become angry because the Ainu people had polluted the river while panning for gold. When life became difficult, the entire Ainu tribe held a meeting and stopped panning for gold, hiding their gold so no one would fight over it. People who knew its location grew old and died, leaving only one elder who knew where it was hidden, but he was killed by a Naparabo. Shira thought he had misheard, as he had only heard that the gold was worth 20 kan. Gaki revealed that the amount was much more than that. Tokushiro deduced that the Naparabo wanted to ensure that only the right person could find the gold, so he spread false information. Anyone could carry 20 kan, but the actual amount could be up to 20,000 kan. Shira had also heard that Tokushiro was planning a coup. With so much gold, he could defeat the 7th Division in Asahikawa. Moto guessed that it was related to the battle at Arthurport. In that battle, Tokushiro and his team won, but the losses were more than half. The chief of staff, obsessed with direct attacks to gain glory, committed suicide out of regret for the losses. The government blamed the entire unit for this. They received no money or medals and were abandoned by the army. Tokushiro decided to build a dictatorial monarchy and take Hokkaido. He planned to build arms factories and sell weapons abroad, and for that he needed money. After hearing this, Moto was determined not to stop. Tokushiro went too far, even killing his own men, partly because of his friend's wife. The next day, Usi and Toshi went out on patrol. Usi separated from the group to visit a brothel and ended up finding Shira, who was gathering information. Usi quickly fled like a mad bull. Usi charged forward unstoppable while Shira did everything to avoid him. But Usi kept advancing, knocking down both man and horse. Shira found some 7th Division soldiers and reported that Usi had a tattoo. The soldiers took defensive positions, but Usi charged straight into them, grabbing Shira and spinning him. Suddenly there was an explosion from underground. Usi's team arrived to take him, while Shira and other parts of the city were hit by bombs. The 7th Division managed to capture a soldier but let Usi escape. Tokushiro checked and found that there were no tattoos. He immediately realized they had been fooled. The real target was the bank. The old samurai entered with his companions to rob the bank, and Tokushiro had found out what the old man needed. Tokushiro rushed to the scene. According to the bank's report, a large sum of money, securities, works of art, and a katana had been stolen. Tokushiro immediately realized that Tashi was involved, but it was too late. Tashi had already stolen Tokushiro's horse and fled. Shira, narrowly escaping death, went to the brothel to gather information. He made a deal with one of the courtesans there. Whenever the man with the tattoo arrived, she would take his belongings and swap them with Shira. As soon as Shira had what he needed, he returned to ask for Ritar and Asirpa's help. She refused, not wanting to put him or his family in danger. Moto had caught a lynx which played dead and then jumped to bite Shira's head to escape. Fortunately, the golden dog caught it. To prove he wasn't useless, Shira asked the golden dog to follow Ussi's scent, and soon they found him. Shira heard that a body had been discovered near the coast, probably caused by a man named Renmi who seemed to be in cahoots with Ussi. Suddenly, the golden dog made a noise, alerting Ussi, who quickly knocked out Shira. That night, Tashi returned and gave Shira two options: follow him or die. He tasked Shira with bringing Renmi's skin. Of course, Shira had no choice but to comply. When Shira returned, he told Moto and Asirpa about Renmi. He was sure that the victim's body, which had target engraved on it, was his work. Shira explained that Renmi was a sadistic killer who enjoyed what he did. Moto remembered that he and Asirpa had seen a similar body earlier that morning, also marked with the word target. Three decided to find Renmi, heading to the coast where the recent victims had been. Fishermen and Asirpa was also craving whale meat. When they arrived, they saw many herring fishing boats on the coast. Renmi could be hiding among the workers. They found Asuma, who hastily took them to sea. Asirpa noticed that a boat had caught a whale but couldn't handle it alone, so they needed help. The whale was enormous, but Moto skillfully launched a harpoon into it and it began to pull the boat, dragging them towards the herring fishing boats. The impact caused a crew member to fall into the water and Moto stayed behind to save him, sending Shira to hunt the whale. Good news, Moto saved the man, but bad news, the man was Renmi. Moto told him to undress and warm up, but Renmi feared his tattoo would be exposed, so Moto covered him with a scarf. Renmi, smelling blood on Moto, realized that Moto, like him, enjoyed killing. After warming up, Renmi returned to his room to change, but a person saw his tattoo and Renmi killed him. Just as Renmi was about to strangle Moto, Moto went up to him asking to stay a few days to look for the killer. Renmi took Asirpa and Moto to see the work that was being done and then invited them to stay for a meal as thanks for saving him. They were served rice and fish. Asirpa suddenly apologized, saying she needed to use the bathroom, and Renmi asked Moto about the feeling of killing, knowing that Moto was a soldier. Moto explained that he could never forget those he killed but felt no guilt because he had reasons for his actions. However, Moto was sure that when he died he would not be able to rest peacefully. The sadistic killer, excited by Moto's words, wanted to kill him in the bathroom. Asirpa discovered the body Renmi had killed. She ran to find Moto, but he had already left. Renmi wanted to take Moto to an isolated place to kill him, but suddenly 7th Division soldiers arrived. Seeing this, Renmi took Moto to a mountain village. Coincidentally, Tokashiro was there meeting with a rich investor to finance a weapons factory. This rich man shared Tokashiro's passion for weapons and boasted of a new acquisition. Outside, Asirpa ran to the village, but instead of looking for Moto, she went straight to the bathroom. Meanwhile, Renmi took Moto to the attic. The two soldiers were searching the area when they spotted Moto. They charged at him. Renmi killed one soldier and stabbed the other in the head. As Renmi celebrated the deaths, the remaining soldier shot him. Renmi fell down the stairs, and hearing the gunshot, Tokashiro arrived at the scene. The rich investor, thinking there was a thief, began shooting indiscriminately, which allowed Moto to escape with Renmi. He dragged the serial killer to the beach to find Shira, who immediately pointed at Renmi. Fortunately, Asirpa had returned from the bathroom just in time to help Moto. Moto managed to stab Renmi twice. But instead of being afraid, Renmi seemed more satisfied, even giving a salute. With the 7th Division approaching, Moto needed to finish things quickly. After all, this would be their last encounter. Moto decided to satisfy Renmi one last time. They exchanged brutal blows and Moto ended with a knife to the heart. He promised to remember Renmi even if he was going to skin him. Unfortunately, just as Moto was about to leave, an orca appeared and devoured Renmi. Moto, Shira, and Asirpa quickly boarded a boat to pursue the whale. Tokashiro also followed closely. The whale seemed to be playing with its prey before consuming it. But Moto dived into the water, took off his clothes, and retrieved Renmi's body. Asirpa launched a harpoon at the orca and began to drag everyone away, allowing them to escape from Tokashiro. Back on shore, Tokashiro was informed about Agata's escape, whom Moto had attacked, and Nihei's disappearance. Meanwhile, Gaki, who was collecting firewood, found Agata and Nihei. They used Asirpa's grandmother to extract information. But when they got nothing useful, they left. Realizing he couldn't stay there any longer, Gaki asked the grandmother for permission to leave. At that moment, a village boy knocked down Gaki, helping him escape with his life. It turns out that Agata had no intention of letting Gaki go. He knew Gaki would report his betrayal to Tokashiro, so it was best to deal with him now. Gaki had no choice but to fight, but he was facing one of the deadliest snipers. As soon as he picked up his binoculars, he was shot. Gaki spread smoke to obscure visibility, and the boy retrieved the gun Asirpa had hidden. Gaki recognized it as old Hoki's gun with only one bullet left, but having already killed a bear before, Gaki felt confident. Meanwhile, after Moto skinned Renmi, the group rested at an inn. An old man appeared and wanted to carry Asirpa. He found the girl familiar and asked her Japanese name, but Moto didn't know. He promised to ask her next time. Shira, who was drunk, had to pull himself together because the old man was Tashi. Tashi reminded Moto to quickly copy the map and hand it over before leaving. Gaki began to climb the mountain, but with his injured leg, he couldn't keep his distance for long. He then stepped in the bear's tracks to erase his trail. Their cat and mouse chase continued until nightfall. When Gaki found the carcass of a deer that the bear had hidden, the weather turned cold and lighting a fire to warm up would only reveal his location. Agata and Nihei waited until morning, and when they noticed the smoke, they arrived only to find a pile of firewood and the deer carcass. Agata sent Nihei to scout while he stayed behind to provide cover. He trusting Agata, Nihei did as instructed and approached the fire. Seeing that there was no one around, Nihei began to warm himself and even started cooking some meat. Suddenly the bear appeared and bit Nihei's ear. He called for Agata, but Agata couldn't shoot without revealing his position. Thinking that Gaki didn't have a gun, Agata shot the bear, but in doing so he exposed himself. The bear was a distraction and a bullet hit Agata in the chest. With Agata beaten, Gaki successfully captured the two men. Suddenly a soldier from Tokashiro's unit arrived. He explained that he had been tracking Agata and Nihei for several days, awaiting orders from Tokashiro. He mentioned that Tokashiro was on his way. As soon as the soldier finished speaking, he was shot dead. Agata, however, was still alive. Unfortunately, the bullet that killed the bear was not enough to finish him off. Agata managed to shoot and retreat, only injuring his opponents to slow them down as he fled. Nihei was captured and interrogated for information about the other traitors. Tokashiro, amused, asked for Nihei's ear, but Nihei refused to cooperate. Tokashiro told him that if he wanted revenge against Moto, he could point out the other traitors. Reluctantly, Nihei revealed their name. Agata successfully escaped. Gaki left after the encounter, and now Moto's group had obtained 5 tattoos. Moto planned to find Tashi first, suspecting that Tashi had some of the skins he needed. Shira revealed that Tashi was considered immortal and was said to consume whale meat to stay alive. Putting that aside, Shira pointed to a snow-covered flower that could be seen as a sign of spring, a season that made Asirpa crave Edo fish, which only appeared during spring. The Ainu people build dams to catch fish but must be careful as some Edo fish can grow large enough to eat an entire bear. While Shira was talking, she suddenly fell into the river. Moto wanted to save her. When he saw the fish, which was even larger than Shira, all he could do was pray. An Ainu man, Kairo, who was a friend of Asirpa's father, jumped into the water to rescue Shira. Afterwards, they all worked together to handle the fish. They roasted it and enjoyed the meal, and Asirpa offered Moto a taste of the fish's eyes. As Moto ate, Kairo mentioned Moto's nickname, the Immortal. He explained that he had heard it when he was in the army. Kairo did not work for Tokashiro and did not know Moto personally. Kairo also mentioned that an old man had come to the village looking for Asirpa, and he called her Asuka in Japanese. Asirpa was shocked because only her parents knew that name. Kairo explained that this happened in a Bashiri prison. Naparabo gave the prisoners a hint on how to contact their friends outside, mentioning Adaru. Naparabo was trying to pass his gold to Asirpa. In other words, Naparabo was Asirpa's father. Asirpa couldn't believe that her father had killed his people to steal gold. Kairo added that he had traveled to Japan with Asirpa's father and Naparabo was not originally Ainu from Japan. Asirpa still couldn't believe it, and she wanted to meet Naparabo. If he really was her father, he would have to reveal everything. However, Shira warned her that finding him would not be easy. Naparabo had escaped from many prisons in Japan and a Bashiri was one of the toughest. There would be no way to find him without Shira's help. Moto, meanwhile, told Kairo that Shira was one of the prisoners. Kairo looked at the tattoo and asked if Moto had more skins. Moto kept that information to himself. Eventually, Kairo decided to join Moto's group. He would take responsibility for returning the remaining gold to the Ainu people as Naparabo's compatriots. The group returned to the village and met with Gaki. They discussed the next step of giving their journey to Shiri, making sure to avoid Asahikawa, which was the 7th Division's headquarters. Kairo suggested taking a route through Sapporo, where he knew a weapons dealer who would not be tracked. They agreed on the plan and decided to rest for the night. Shira, however, had doubts about Kairo's reliability, but Moto also didn't trust Shira. However, since Asirpa trusted him, the others also trusted him. The next day they set off with Shira having to ride a small horse without complaining. Soon after, they arrived in Sapporo, where they obtained weapons and ammunition. Shira, looking for some entertainment, asked the owner of the place about the local area. The owner mentioned a nearby hotel where the owner, a beautiful woman named Kano, had met Ushi. Kano would recognize him, but luckily Ushi's attention seemed to be focused elsewhere. When they entered his room, Ushi immediately tried to grab her. But at that moment, Moto and the group arrived and Kano scheduled a meeting with him for the evening. Shira, distracted by Ushi's gaze, didn't recognize her. The hotel was like a labyrinth, old and renovated many times. As they were about to enter the room, Kano began to watch Ushi, ignoring Shira and focusing on Ushi's perfect body and Asirpa's beautiful eyes. Shira went out to find Kano, but Kano kept appearing and disappearing, eventually leading Shira to Ushi's room. Ushi still hadn't noticed him. Just as Shira was about to be discovered, Kano used a trap to lead her away. Moto heard something and Asirpa explained that it was just her stomach rumbling. So everyone decided to go eat. They ended up finding Ushi but didn't recognize each other. Moto knew that Ushi practiced judo by the peculiar shape of his ears. The two exchanged moves and Ushi, intrigued by Moto, invited him to drink. Meanwhile, Shira ended up in a room where Kano dealt with dead bodies and discovered the truth. However, Kano was waiting behind him. At the restaurant, Asirpa was invited to eat something that turned out to be curry, and despite the strange appearance, it was delicious. After a few beers, everyone started to get drunk. Ushi ended the drinking session because someone was waiting for him at the hotel. When he returned, Kano was nowhere to be found. But he noticed the hole he had made before and became suspicious. Ushi accidentally triggered a trap and was led to where Shira was tied up. Shira tried to warn him about Kano, but Ushi mistook Shira for Kano and tried to attack her. Shira suddenly remembered that Kano was the old prisoner with a wart on his lip from his time in prison. At this moment, Ushi, now drunk, only had one thing on his mind: getting to the innkeeper. Shira saw that the situation was desperate, so he quickly fled. Meanwhile, Kano, who planned to shoot Shira's eye, sneaked towards Moto's room. Moto woke up in time to punch Kano in the face, but Kano denied it. Moto wondered how he had gotten in since he had locked the door. Shira outside shouted to warn Moto that Kano was a mad doctor who kidnapped patients and experimented on them. When Kano's true identity as a doctor was revealed, he shot a needle into Asirpa's heart, but Moto took the hit instead, giving Kano a chance to escape. Moto, worried, quickly ran to wake up Kairo, but Kairo was dead to the world, sleeping like a rock. The doctor reappeared, trying to capture Shira, who fled, throwing bombs in his path. To everyone's surprise, Ushi arrived and began fighting the doctor. As he ran, Moto stopped in front of them. With no other choice, the doctor revealed that Ushi also had a tattoo. This caused the two beasts to turn on each other, and despite Ushi's larger build, Moto was overpowered and thrown like a rag doll. Fortunately, Moto managed to escape thanks to a trap. As for the doctor, he decided to abandon everything. However, Shira, still furious, tracked him down and continued throwing bombs at him. Moto fell into a pit full of organs, surrounded by alcohol, which soon caught fire. Meanwhile, Shira found Ushi, who delivered a message from Tokashiro to Shira, warning him to always inform Tokashiro of his position and not to play with him. Shira recognized the message and quickly set off to find the bomb bag. The good news is that he found it. But the bad news was that it fell right into the pit where Moto had fallen. Shira ran to get everyone out of there before the entire inn exploded. The next day, Shira met with Ushi to deliver the copied map. He also learned that the Dr. Kano had survived the explosion and had important information. Afterwards, Shira returned to Moto's group. Now they needed money to buy more explosives, so they decided to hunt for some and stay in a nearby Ainu village. In the Naganuma forest, Asirpa learned a fox using a trap made of 3 long nails hammered into an old oil barrel. When the fox licked the oil, it got stuck. Although they couldn't sell the fur for much, it was still worth something. Kairo, however, pointed out that Shira had spent all their money on gambling and he was punished for it. Then they arrived at a nearby village, where a village elder was one of Asirpa's father's 6 brothers. He was happy to receive the guests and mentioned a strange woman who had recently arrived in the village. She was a psychic who was causing a stir in the village. While they were talking, the psychic Karma appeared. Shira, always in love with beautiful women, perked up when he saw her. Karma decided to read their fortunes and predicted that the thing they were all looking for would never materialize. Karma advised them to give up. Asirpa, being a modern Ainu, didn't believe in fortune-telling, but Karma, who had a talent for predicting the future, made it clear that believing her or not was Asirpa's choice. Before leaving, Karma also predicted that Asirpa was looking for her father. That night, it seemed that the group was still not convinced about Karma, but Shira, not knowing if Karma really believed, took her to a horse racing track the next day and asked her to predict the winner of the race. She agreed on the condition that Shira had to buy something from her. Karma correctly predicted the winner of each race, and soon Shira started winning money. When Moto's group found him, he acted much more confidently, paying generously, although Asirpa still reprimanded him for his superstition. Kairo, who had been around horses since he was young, noticed some horses with better chances of winning, and as they walked around the racetrack, he was mistaken for a jockey. Since one of their jockeys had run away, they needed a replacement. In the stables, Kairo realized that the horse he was supposed to ride was destined to lose. It had been made slow by being overhydrated. Meanwhile, the horse that was about to win had been doped. Kairo then returned to Moto's group and informed them that the horse he would ride, number 3, would win, and they should bet on it. Shira asked Karma to predict again, and she told him that number 3 would lose and number 6 would win. It turned out that the odds were being controlled by a Yakuza group. Shira, believing Karma's prediction, went ahead and placed his bet. Moto, seeing what Shira was doing, locked him up. But Shira still managed to get Karma to place the bet on number 6. Shira believed they needed money urgently, and gambling was the only way to get it. Asirpa ran after Karma, but she had already placed all the bets. Karma only praised Asirpa for having eyes like her father's before leaving. The horse race started and Kairo was immediately sabotaged. Despite this, he skillfully maneuvered his horse and overtook everyone, easily winning. The horse race itself was not much and the story didn't cut anything. After losing all their money on bets, Shira was like a doped fool. However, Asirpa's group managed to win because among the bets, Karma had placed one on horse number 3. Kairo suggested that they leave the area quickly, as the Yakuza would probably pursue them after such a big loss. However, they didn't need to worry as Tokashiro had already settled the matter. Inside, Tokashiro found the hiding place but found Oga, who had come to join Tokashiro's side. That afternoon, Shira came to his senses and rejoined Moto's group. Although he was still a bit out of it, he had important information for Mode. Kano had revealed the location of the next hiding place, which was in a house in Uebari. They weren't sure if the plan to get to Abashiri would work, so they would prioritize finding the hiding place while traveling to the prison as there was information about it along the way. They then set off for Uebari. Winter passed quietly, leaving behind cold winds and a gray melancholy, giving way to spring with its gentle breeze, warm sunlight, and life-filled sprout. In Uebari, Tokashiro visited a taxidermy shop. He came here to find some things to decorate the 7th Division, and the works here were made with great precision. Craftsman Edagai used fresh corpses to ensure the authenticity of his creation. Tokashiro admired the works and praised Edagai. In addition to shopping, he was here to return a pair of gloves that Edagai had dropped in the cemetery. Edagai began to feel uncomfortable. Outside, Nihei was with a sniper aiming. There were rumors about a coal miner who had died in an accident, a man with strange tattoos. Tokashiro and his companion had exhumed the body, but it was empty. The atmosphere here was cold and dry, causing the body not to decompose when buried, making Inari a great source of fresh bodies. Tokashiro deduced that Edogai often robbed graves to obtain fresh bodies. Tokashiro was not here to arrest Edogai. In fact, he found his work impressive and asked for another pair of gloves. Edogai explained that the gloves were not made of human skin but of pig leather. His visits to the cemetery were only to bury his defective works, so he went to get the other glove for Tokashiro. While Edogai rambled, Tokashiro checked around and discovered a pile of human-shaped taxidermy. Edogai had dressed up to confront Tokashiro. His mother constantly urged him to kill Tokashiro. But Edogai was fighting a mental battle, conflicted between his talent being recognized and his mother's demand. He began to argue with her in his mind until he lost control. Tokashiro had to show him a coat made of human skin, which calmed Edogai. Edogai's mother still insisted that he kill Tokashiro, so both went outside for Edogai to examine the situation more closely. He even encouraged Tokashiro to use some herbs so that his skin wouldn't itch while wearing it. Tokashiro then wanted to see Edogai's works made of human skin. Each piece was bizarre. The sniper outside looked in, mesmerized. Meanwhile, Nihei went to meet Edogai's mother and accidentally dropped his ear on her. He rushed to find her. As soon as Edogai entered the room, Tokashiro handed him a gun and told him to shoot his mother, saying that it was the only way for him to be free and mature. After the shot, Edogai no longer heard his mother's voice. Tokashiro made a deal with Edogai. He wanted Edogai to create skins with fake codes known only to his division. Tokashiro intended to bring chaos to the war. In Adaru, Ushi took care of Kano. Currently, Tokashiro had a total of 6 skins, and it was clear that Tokashiro's goal was to restore the Republic of Yizo. They discussed Noprabo's intentions. If he was Ainu, why would he harm his own people just to seize the gold? Tokashiro speculated that Noprabo could be a supporter of the Russian Far East, posing as an Ainu. Russia was a fragmented country at the time, which meant that Noprabo was probably a guerrilla commander, trying to raise money to finance the war for independence. He had planned to smuggle the money through Sakhalin, but failed, leading to all the events that had unfolded. Tokashiro still didn't fully trust Noprabo, and his ally could be a guerrilla pretending to be an Ainu. Back to Moto's group, their daily routine consisted of moving, eating, and sleeping. Asirpa often had dreams about her father, who told her stories about her mother, describing her as a very beautiful woman. Asirpa had both her father's blood and her mother's Ainu blood. She believed she would be a modern Ainu and would lead the Ainu people here. During one of these beautiful dreams, Asirpa was woken up by Shira's snoring, which made her angry. Edogai was still struggling to come up with the perfect idea for making fake skins. Meanwhile in Adaru, Gaki and Asoma went to buy weapons. On the way back they found a deer and decided to test the weapon. When a tree branch broke, the deer was startled, but Gaki managed to shoot it in the thigh, preventing it from escaping. Gaki asked about a boy hiding nearby, and Asoma explained that the boy was very introverted, didn't like to play with others in the village but loved to hunt. He looked like Asoma when he was younger, so he called the boy to see. After dealing with the deer, they returned to the village and found Karma. Gaki didn't believe in fortune-telling, but Karma expressed condolences for Gaki's recently deceased brother, which shocked him. Karma said she came to look for Asirpa. Then she met with the village elder and shared that one of the 3 people traveling with Asirpa was a traitor. If they didn't stop them, Asirpa's life would be in danger. Seeing the concern on everyone's faces, Gaki made a decision. The next day, he set off, disconnected. But the boy he thought was a boy turned out to be a girl. She had knitted a glove for him, and in Ainu tradition, if a girl knits gloves for a boy, it signifies deep affection. Asirpa's mother had blessed him, and Karma accompanied him to guide the way. Before this, Karma had met with Tokashiro, and the two had discussed something. After 7 attempts, Edogai finally managed to make 6 perfect samples of fake skins. He was about to hand them over to Tokashiro when one of the 2 soldiers guarding Edogai was shot dead. Oga had arrived, and Edogai quickly fled with the skins. The other soldier who had gone to buy supplies realized he had forgotten his money and went back to get it. He was unwittingly discovered by Moto and Shira, who were gathering information nearby. Unable to reach Asirpa and Kairo in time, they decided to pursue the soldier alone. On the way back, the soldier heard an old man talking about the appearance of a white bear. Oga suddenly entered looking for Edogai. It was clear that Edogai admired Tokashiro so much that he even created a taxidermy in his image. He even found several samples to make fake skins. At that moment, the soldier returned. It was evident that the 7th Division soldiers were formidable, only losing when ambushed, not in a direct confrontation. Oga was forced to hide among the stuffed animals after a few shots. The soldier went to look for Edogai, and learning that he had fled, went looking for the white bear the old man had spoken of. Edogai was running for his life. Oga was about to pursue when he found Shira and Moto, who had just arrived. They checked the area and found a soldier's body. Shira was then captured by Oga, who gave Shira a clue and let Moto see it. The two then pursued the soldier. Oga eventually caught up with Edogai in a mine, but the soldier used a mining cart to pull Edogai. Moto, Shira, and Oga immediately pursued them. Everyone entered the mine, determined not to let the skins escape, as this would cause chaos if they leaked. Moto and Shira caught up with Edogai, and during the fight, Moto triggered a switch that separated them from Edogai. Oga took the opportunity to pursue Edogai. They passed a group of miners who were installing explosives, and Oga barely passed while Edogai barely managed to get through before the explosion occurred. But the explosion caused gas to leak, and when it caught fire, the entire mine exploded. Everyone was trapped inside and the gas began to spread. Edogai was trapped under a pile of rocks, seemingly dead. Unable to find Tokashiro and kiss his feet, Edogai handed the skins to the soldier, instructing him to give them to Tokashiro. The only way to stop the fire from spreading was to block the airflow. If the soldier didn't hurry, they would seal all the exits. Meanwhile, Shira had passed out. The gas began to thicken and Moto struggled to drag Shira. It was too late, as the miners had blocked all the exits. Moto desperately tried to break through the wooden barricades, but to no avail. Just as they were about to perish, Ushi appeared to save them. He easily pulled the two out of the mine. Oga also escaped soon after and then dragged everyone to see the fake skins Edogai had made. Tokashiro arrived soon after and found a piece of leather left behind, not knowing if it was true or false. Shira then informed Moto that the old man was the legendary samurai Toshigo. Now he wanted to know if Naparabo was really Ainu or not. Before answering that question, Tokashiro wanted to know if Moto intended to collaborate or oppose. One of Tokashiro's allies came forward and suggested buying the skin for a sum of gold, which would allow Moto to marry and live a comfortable life. However, Moto didn't need the money now. What he was looking for was a chance to find Naparabo and get the answer. At that moment, Asirpa's stomach rumbled loudly, breaking the tension. Kanda entered and offered to cook a meal, suggesting they discuss things while they ate. The scene looked like something out of a painting. For now, their priority was to find a way to distinguish between the real and fake skins. Meanwhile, in Ataru, the surviving soldier returned and handed the skins to Tokashiro. He conveyed Edogai's last message, "Let me kiss your feet." Although Edogai had actually said only one word, iron, of course, with Tokashiro's keen mind, he quickly realized that this was the key to distinguishing the real from the fake. The next day, everyone split up to look for clues around the city. In Edogai's house, only Tashi, Oga, and Kanda remained. Suddenly, they were set on fire from outside. The Nihei team surrounded the house to destroy the evidence with iron bars on the windows. Going out the front door was like presenting themselves as target. Oga ran to the second floor while Tokashiro stayed on the ground floor. Oga fired wildly from above while Tokashiro continuously shot outside. Any soldier who dared to go out into the open was shot by Oga. When Tokashiro ran out of bullets, the Nihei team stormed in. He sent a soldier to look for Oga while he dealt with Tokashiro. Oga managed to surprise a soldier, but the soldier was very strong and fought back, overpowering Oga. Kanda tried to find an escape route, and just as Moto's group returned, quickly ran upstairs to rescue Oga. Nihei, now on top of Tokashiro, was distracted by Moto's noise and looked the other way. Tokashiro quickly cut off one of Nihei's legs, reloaded, and almost finished him off. But Nihei managed to escape. The fire spread quickly, forcing everyone to retreat. They decided to split into two groups and flee, planning to meet at. This was a temporary alliance between the two sides. The next day, Moto's group, consisting of him, Asirpa, Ushi, and Oga, was in the forest when Asirpa spotted some woodpeckers. In this season, their meat was very tender. Oga planned to shoot one, but Asirpa stopped him. If they shot one, the others would flee. They decided to set a trap based on their behavior, but only caught two, which frustrated Asirpa. Oga returned with 3 birds he had shot down to prove Asirpa wrong. Asirpa began to prepare the meat, reserving the fresh brains for Ushi. He found it a bit disgusting, but seeing Moto eat, he decided to try it. The group enjoyed a meal of chopped woodpecker meat together and, despite the differences, worked well as a team. Meanwhile, Gaki was in looking for Asirpa's whereabouts. The young man who had followed him earlier insisted on continuing the journey with Gaki despite his protest. Back to Tokashiro, they still didn't know how to distinguish the real skins from the fake ones. Their only hope was to confront Naparabo directly in prison and ask him, trusting the only person they trusted, Shira. Shira went to relieve himself and by chance found Moto. The two talked in private and Moto realized that Shira had been working for Tokashiro from the moment he arrived at the inn. Moto became suspicious and began to stab Shira with a knife, which frightened him. However, this was just a nightmare Shira was having. He decided to flee before Moto could kill him. As he hurried out, he encountered the 7th Division and despite trying to escape, Shira was easily captured. Tokashiro updated the others, informing them that Shira would probably be taken to Asahikawa. If that happened, it would cause problems for them. It would take several months for Shira to find a way out. They waited for Moto's group to arrive, and at that moment, Tokashiro and Kairo would leave to rescue Shira. Meanwhile, Mbin Saoduin himself and Yumizama, while Karma was fortune-telling, Gaki gathered information and discovered Asirpa's whereabouts. When Moto's group reunited, Tokashiro and Kairo prepared to leave, and Tokashiro discovered Kairo's true identity. During transport, Shira noticed an old man selling green bean cakes and ran to him. It happened to be Tokashiro, who gave him a signal on the bridge. At that location, Kairo had prepared a boat. As the bridge was small, only 10 people could cross at a time. When it was Shira's turn, Tokashiro appeared and cut the bridge rope, causing everyone to fall into the water. Kairo quickly rowed the boat towards them. As he was about to grab Kairo's hand, Shira, fearing the feeling of being killed by Moto, chose to let go. He preferred to be captured than to be killed. Tokashiro returned and reported the situation, assuming that Shira was already in Asahikawa. No one knew how long it would take. Fleeing and thinking of Shira's arrogant face, everyone decided to abandon him. However, Moto said he would save the idiot. After all, Shira still had some use. So everyone agreed. Tokashiro had already planned this. In Ataru, after Nihei returned, he had lost his mind and was constantly stealing opiates to relieve the pain. It was difficult to control him. When Tokashiro arrived, Nihei finally calmed down. Outside was Lieutenant Arasaka waiting for Tokashiro. He was known for being a genius weapons inventor. The two had a good connection and talked well together. Arasaka had brought many new weapons that day. Tokashiro also told Arasaka about an incident where his men were attacked by a bear and lost a leg. Tokashiro asked Arasaka to help Nihei. A few days later, Arasaka had made a prosthetic leg for Nihei which could also fire bullets from the heel. With this, Nihei could continue his quest for revenge. Outside Asahikawa, Moto was introduced to Suzukawa, a master of disguise and one of the prisoners. They needed to disguise themselves to investigate the place where Shira was being held. They had to disguise themselves as someone whose face was rarely seen. Tokashiro thought of Shurasuke, the director of a Bashiri prison, a little-known man. Soon after, Suzukawa successfully disguised himself as a perfect replica of Shurasuke. At this moment, Asirpa had fallen asleep next to Tokashiro and Moto. Seeing Tokashiro holding her reminded him of the moment at the inn. He realized that Shira was the traitor, but it was not the right time to confront him. Moto was angry, but since Asirpa had just woken up, he had to suppress his feeling. The next day, based on the number on Shira's uniform, 27, Cairo identified where Shira was being held. However, Unit 27 was under Tokashiro's command, so it was likely that Tokashiro would hide Shira in Colonel Yudo's camp. He was invited to meet with Shurasuke. When he arrived, he saw Suzukawa and Moto disguised. Outside, Oga was observing the situation. Without wasting time, they asked directly for Shira. Since Shira's capture had not been made public, how could Shurasuke know about it? A subordinate of Tokashiro then went out to send a message to Tokashiro. Inside, Suzukawa pulled out a pile of counterfeit money and discussed how it was made. This would be useful in the future if a war broke out, and with this he could gain merit and be promoted. Tokashiro heard this, but since he couldn't get there in time, he called the operator to inform the other side that his men were still monitoring the real Shurasuke. If anything happened, they would know immediately. Tokashiro's subordinate met with Suzukawa, and Oga recognized that the man was not ordinary. Inside, Shira was brought in and he quickly recognized Moto. At that moment, a black soldier arrived, assigned to keep him under control. He began to expose Suzukawa, speaking in the local language that only Shurasuke knew. Of course, Suzukawa could also speak it. After a moment, the black soldier killed Suzukawa and wounded Moto. Despite being wounded, Moto dragged Shira and jumped out the window. Oga outside provided covering fire. The three reunited and headed for escape. They arrived at a hot air balloon testing site and decided to steal it. The soldiers tried to stop them and the black soldier quickly climbed up to pursue them. Moto wanted to deal with the soldier himself, but since he was wounded, he couldn't fight effectively. Asirpa from below fired supporting shots. Shira took the opportunity, kicked the black soldier and managed to hold on. Shira went through a terrible experience getting tangled in branches, but Asirpa climbed up and joined him. Fortunately, everyone managed to escape. Moto was hit by 3 bullets, so Asirpa began to extract them. Shira was surprised by Moto's recklessness, but Moto simply said that he saved Shira because he still had some use. Moto also revealed that Shira was working for Tokashiro, which made Shira panic and flee. However, Moto realized that the replica of the tattoo that Shira had was fake, meaning that Shira had not actually betrayed him and Asirpa. The hot air balloon encountered some problems, forcing them to land nearby. Since they hadn't flown far, the 7th Division could easily pursue them on horseback. Asirpa used some herbs to stop Moto's bleeding and they continued their journey. After traveling a little further, they were caught up again. Now they would have to cross the snowy mountain if they hoped to shake off their pursuers. The higher they climbed, the colder the temperature became. Shira stayed and the snowstorm gradually worsened. Shira, very cold, began to lose his sanity. Asirpa decided to take a break and signaled Oga to shoot 2 deer so they could use the skins as shelter. However, while skinning one of the deer, Shira became delirious and began to run around. Asirpa quickly went after him, but before she could catch him, he came back holding a deer. Now Moto had to go look for Asirpa. He finally found her at nightfall, but it was too late to go back. Asirpa noticed another deer nearby, and this time Moto didn't hesitate. He shot it down and together with Asirpa they hid inside the deer's body. While inside, they talked and ate. Asirpa ate the deer's liver while also enjoying the brain. Moto preferred dried persimmons, something he hadn't had in a long time. He remembered eating them with a friend before joining the army. If he could, he wished he could go back to being as he was before, not the killing machine he had become. Asirpa wanted that when everything was over, Moto would take her to his hometown so she could taste dried persimmons. The next day, everyone regrouped. Oga observed that there was no sign of anyone. Shira didn't think they had given up. Perhaps they were waiting for them to descend the mountain to a Bashiri, so they decided to go straight to Takachi. They made this decision because they had previously agreed with Kiro and the others to meet in a Bashiri, in case they were separated. Meanwhile, Gaki had just received an email from Asoma, informing him that Asirpa's grandmother should not live much longer. When an elderly Ainu person knows they are about to die, they silently prepare their burial cloth. Gaki didn't want his grandmother to die, so he decided that they needed to find Asirpa quickly. Gaki was determined to bring Asirpa back to help her grandmother recover. She had taken care of him and other orphaned children, so he needed to repay her kindness. After a long journey, Gaki learned from the local Ainu that they had seen someone who looked like Asirpa. They went to the Kashiro swamp, where Gaki found a person dancing hip-hop exactly like Asirpa. It was indeed her, dancing to aid digestion. Finally, they reunited. Gaki was surprised to find Oga there too. Putting that aside, he told Asirpa about her grandmother's condition. Now the modern Ainu girl had to choose between seeking answers or returning to her grandma.